Rules, rules, rules. It seems there are rules everywhere. Our guest today says that great leaders have no rules. Are you ready? Well, let's get started.
Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We are here each week to talk about leadership, teamwork, organizational culture, and human potential with experts from every walk of life. Your host is Kevin Eikenberry, a best-selling author and leadership thought leader for 25 years. This episode is sponsored by Kevin's book, The Long Distance Leader: Rules for Remarkable Remote Leadership. Order your copy today at remarkablepodcast.com/book. And now, here's your host, Kevin.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. I've got a great guest today. I have a New York Times bestselling author. He's not the first one of those we've had. I've got a serial entrepreneur. He's not the first one of those we've ever had, but he's, I think, the first guest who shares my first name. My guest today is Kevin Kruse. He is a New York Times bestselling author. He is a serial entrepreneur who has started and or co-founded several multi-million-dollar businesses. His articles on leadership have appeared in Forbes, Inc., and a number of other publications. And his podcast, the LEADx Leadership Show, has been downloaded over 1 million times. He is the founder and CEO of LEADx, with a mission to spark 100 million new leaders. He lives in Philadelphia. He's our guest today. Kevin, welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm excited to be chatting with you.
Hey, it's a pleasure to have you here today. So we're going to spend some time talking about your brand new book, which is called Great Leaders Have No Rules. Now, I would show you all the copy I have, but he has told me that it is not what the real copy is going to look like, that this proof doesn't have the right cover. So I'm not going to show you, but I'm going to tell you that you're going to want a copy. By the time you're all listening to this or watching this, you will be able to get a copy. And the book is called Great Leaders Have No Rules. We're going to get to that in a minute. But first, Kevin, so tell us a little bit about your journey. How do you sort of get on the path that you got on, the writing, the starting company? Just talk a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, I mean, the short-ish version, Kevin, is that I, from a very young age, decided I was going to be an entrepreneur. It was a dream that my father had. And when I was probably, 10 years old, he had started a company and it went bankrupt. And I saw, we actually got thrown out of our house. We lost everything. But rather than scaring me away for whatever weird reason, it anchored in my head that I'm never going to get thrown out of my house again. I'm going to make a lot of money when I grow up, kind of thing, kind of simple 10-year-old thoughts. And so I, in my 20s, started my first companies. The first ones failed miserably. Fortunately, I kept at it. And LEADx, depending on how you count, it's my 6th or 7th startup. And, some have done well, some didn't. And looking back, especially when I was in my 20s, but even in my 30s, at first, I didn't know anything about leadership at all. I just didn't think about it. I knew about sales. I wanted to go sell something, or I needed to whatever. I just didn't think about leadership. And then when I finally realized that I was failing because of a lack of leadership,
right?
I became aware of it. But then I was taught a lot of the old school management wisdom that, frankly, does more harm than good these days. And I think leadership is a superpower. If you boil leadership down, to me, it means influence. So it starts with self-influence, self-leadership. And if I can lead myself away from the potato chips and onto the treadmill, that can change my life. If I can lead myself in my marriage or with my kids.
By the way, if you lead yourself away from the treadmill and toward the potato chips, that will also change your life.
It will.
Positive.
Well, but so you just hit on, actually, it's the final chapter where, look, we're leading all of the time, right? It's just, are you leading towards the treadmill? Or are you leading towards the chips? In every relationship, you're either strengthening it or it's not getting stronger. And so finally, I had sold a business about 10 years ago and decided to pursue a second passion, which is writing and speaking. And I just made a promise to myself that for the rest of my life, I'll write one book a year. And so by day, I run this software company, but by nights and weekends and vacations, I write. And so I think leadership is a superpower. I think productivity is a superpower. These are the themes I kind of keep coming back to. And finally, with this, new book, it's to really say, hey, look, a lot of that classic leadership wisdom is wrong, and you need to kind of flip it around or take a new look at it.
I think that's really the best. I mean, the marketer in me loves the fact that it's the Contrarian Leadership Principles to transform your team and business. That's the subtitle of the book. I mean, the marketer in me says, yeah, that's right on. It's the Contrarian view,
right,
all that stuff. And yet I think what you just said is really what you're doing with the book, which is re-looking at some of these things.
Yeah.
And yes, some of them are pretty contrarian, but you're not saying the earth is flat.
No, I'm not. And I'm not ashamed to say I absolutely write with a marketer's hat on as well. It's, I learned a long time ago, it's sort of the first step in persuasion is attention. If you have nobody's attention, you can't help them, you can't sell them, whatever you're trying to do. And so certainly with the chapter titles that I have, they're designed to make people talk.
Well, and that's what I thought we'd do. And so I'm glad that you said that. Yeah. So the first chapter, so you have a book that says have no rules. So that's the first chapter. So let's start with why it is, Kevin, that you think, why you have such a, what I'll call healthy disdain for rules.
Yeah, the origin of this and the rules, my problem with rules, it actually started 20 years ago. So I was 30 years old. I just sold a business. And as part of the deal, I was joining the acquiring company as a vice president, as a partner. I'd report to the CEO. Sounds good.
By the way, everybody, right? I know the story that's coming. It's in the book. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm there for about 30 days. I get my first expense reimbursement check. I open it up and it's short by about $4. And I thought maybe I filled the form out wrong or something. Not a lot of money, but I want to know. So I asked the CFO and he emails me and he says, oh, we deducted your Post-it notes. We don't reimburse for Post-it notes. So I email him back. Why is that? And he says, wasteful expense. So I had just bumped in. You're waving your Post-it notes.
I'm apparently wasteful. Kevin.
Yeah, right. Wasteful. Now I had bumped into my first rule. And so the problem with rules is that every time I bump into a rule, it stops me from making a choice, making a decision, thinking about something, and it becomes more your company than my company. Now, no one had told me about this rule. It was a black and white rule. It was a very specific micro rule. I didn't know why it was there, where it came from. And I actually went to the CEO about this, right? Because all of a sudden, with how much did I feel like a vice president when I couldn't buy my own Post-it notes? How much did I feel that I was a partner with an equal vote to the CEO when I just got banned from buying Post-it notes? And a buddy of mine who was in the company that same day, they shorted him $3 because he was traveling, had dinner while he was on business. He ordered a beer with dinner and they said, no, you don't get that $3 because we don't reimburse for alcohol. He could have bought a $6 milkshake. They would have paid for that, but not his $3 beer.
So and it cost him $7 to find the $3, but that's a whole other issue.
That's right. That's the other problem with the rules. But I go to the CEO and I explain this, and to my surprise, he says, oh, Kevin, I didn't know it was bothering people. Okay, that rule's gone. People can buy Post-it notes. But he said, I don't care about the Post-it notes. He said, our values, one of them was growth and profit. It was a written value to be profitable. And so he said, I used to walk around this company. Everybody had their Post-it notes. They would doodle on them. They would write phone messages on them. They would just decorate their wall with funny shapes with them. It's a wasteful expense. He says, here's what I do. And he pulled he had his scrap paper from his printer and he would tear it. And so he had a stack of this ragged pieces of paper that he would use for scratch paper or notes.
As a CEO, let's look at the cost of him to anyway, whole other conversation. So he says it's not about the Post-it note, right? The point is
right. So this is what he says. It's not about the Post-it note. It's a symbol of frugality. It was just a symbol, a reminder to be frugal. Now, even though he took the rule away, I stayed there 5 years, long beyond my earn-out thing and my non-compete. I stayed there 5 years, and I never again bought Post-it notes, even though the rule had been overturned. Because here's the thing. I had a conversation with my boss, my manager, and it strengthened our relationship to have this conversation where we disagreed about somebody who was explaining. it was anchored on value. Now, all of a sudden I realized the Post-it note is about our values. And I want to, I was there. I wanted to be a team player. I wanted to support it. I recognized that it wasn't about the note. It was about the symbolism. And so as a leader in the company, I no longer bought Post-it notes, and I ripped up the paper like all the other executives. But it was a completely different thing. So when you come in and you bump into that rule, the dress code rule, the travel expense rule, you can only use blue ink for no good reason rule, whatever that silly thing is, and you've got no conversation around it, there's no linkage to values, it's your company, it's not my company. An engaging conversation is to say, you know what, we've got as few rules as possible. We've got rules that link up to a law. We've got rules like don't go play on the railroad tracks if you're listening to music, you're going to get run over, like safety rules. And if we're really, really bad at hiring, you might need some rules to like cage some people in a little. It probably doesn't even work. But other than that, you got to be great at hiring. Let's hire great people. Let's align on mission. Let's from day one have a conversation about values and use those as guardrails. I mean, all they needed to have done was, paid me my $4 for the Post-it notes. And then in my next normal conversation said, hey, Kevin, by the way, we noticed those Post-it notes. Let me tell you a story about why I rip up paper. Now it's this legendary story. It's about frugality. It brings us closer. It's something I get excited. I can think of little weird, quirky ways to tell my team members about being frugal. It's a whole different conversation. And Kevin, if this isn't weird enough, like I believe though, like, again, we lead in all areas of our life. I don't think parents should have rules for their kids. Now, I was raised with a curfew. Most people, curfews are normal. I've got 3 kids. They've never had a curfew. And it doesn't mean, like I saw my father had a curfew with me and my sisters. And it became about the rule. Like when they would come home at 10:05 at night as a 15-year-old, my dad was
crazy about 5 minutes, basically.
5 minutes. And to him, it was about lack of respect and irresponsible. And you said your watch is 5 minutes earlier than that. Well, now you're a liar. It becomes about all this stuff when it should have been, are your children home and safe at a reasonable hour? And from my sisters, it was my dad's house, not their house, my dad's family, not their family. And now they're getting attacked and accused, and there's anger and hormones, and relationships deteriorate. It's not with my kids that I say that I don't care when they come home. It's not that they do whatever they want. If it's Saturday night and they're like, hey, Dad, there's a big high school party we're going to go to, I say, what time do you want to come home? And I love you so much that I can't go to sleep until you're home because I'm going to be worrying about you. And you remember that your brother Owen has a big basketball tournament tomorrow morning, so we got to wake up early for that. So given that I can't sleep because I'm going to be worried about you and I got to get up early, what time do you want to come home tonight? And they say 11, and I say fine. And then whether it's 10:50 or 11:10, they're home at a reasonable hour. And it's a whole different relationship.
So that reminds me, I have something I haven't thought of in years. I've certainly never mentioned on this show, Kevin. And so I had one of those conversations with my dad. I was a senior in high school, and it was prom night. And I said something about, well, when you want me home, he says, I don't care when you get home, but you'll be in church in the morning, you'll be awake. So there's values right there, and there's a boundary. And when I was home, there's a longer story that doesn't require here in terms of why I was home earlier, and the fact that I'd worked all week on the farm and all that stuff. But the point is that was the thing, and it's the same point you're making. The point is, here's the value that this is created around,
right?
And then we can have a conversation about that, right?
And but you know what? I hate to go so deep on this, but Kevin, that story you just shared is powerful because it wasn't at all a rule about some arbitrary rule about coming home. It was about, okay, how are we going to measure this differently? Church on time, awake in the morning, awake. And so I've got a 15-year-old son, and I was just having this conversation an hour ago with someone where, to me, he's on his screen time is out of control. He's always watching YouTube videos or he's playing video games. And my reaction, my knee-jerk reaction is, dude, get off that thing, or only 3 hours a day or 2 hours, like whatever. I go to think about controlling the behavior, but I got to back up and I say, wait a minute. What do I want my son to be doing? I want him to be physically and emotionally healthy. He is. I want him to get good grades. He's a 4.0 student. I want him to be physically active. He plays soccer and basketball. Every weekend he's at practice. 2 nights a week he's at practice. I want him to have friends in the real world and learn social skills. He goes to parties and has friends. I want him to be polite. He's nice. He is. So I'm like, wait, he's got all these things. He's an athlete, a student, has friends, is happy. Keep doing whatever you're doing, son. Like, why would I now take your phone away? Right.
Right. Well, yeah. And so that gets into what's in our own heads. Right. And a lot of times we create the rule based on what's in our head. And it's the same thing. It goes all the way back to the frugality thing. So we don't want to make this entire show about just one chapter of the book.
Right.
I want to talk about, well, you mentioned smartphones. You mentioned your son's screen time, and another place where we agree drastically. We are in drastic agreement is the chapter that we talk about our smartphones. And
yeah, turn off your smartphone.
Turn it off. Put it away. Don't look at it. Put it on the. So I charge mine back here rather than here. I have it right here because I want the time, because it's easier with my eyes to see that than to see down here.
Right.
But otherwise, it's back there. I can't. I mean, it's in the room, but I can't see it. I'm not looking at it or anything like that. Changes everything. Talk about. You have a lot of great research that you talk about in the book that gets at some of that. Just talk to that just for a minute.
Well,
I think all of us.
And what's amazing, and this is really good news. I mean, I wrote this book 2 years ago, and people weren't really talking about the issues much. And now we're starting to see in the press about the dangers of phone addiction and phone interruptions and all the rest. And this was a chapter that, I fought with my editors on, because they said, wait a minute, you're talking about putting away a smartphone. Like, how is this a leadership topic? And I said, okay, first of all, if you want your team to be productive, putting away the smartphone's a leadership topic. If you want them to be safe instead of texting and driving or walking off a bridge, while they're texting or whatever, if you want your people to be safe, this is a leadership topic. And oddly, it's becoming an issue where, these are little surveillance machines. They can record conversations, videos, et cetera. And if you want to be able to talk honestly, brainstorm honestly, et cetera, maybe you need those phones out of the conference room so people aren't feeling like, okay, we're distracted or doing other things, or we're recording things and who knows where this is gonna, end up in the future. And so, these are wonderful. They can be wonderful tools. But the thing is, you want to use it when you want to use it, not when it buzzes and beckons and flashes and draws you back. I mean, these companies, the app companies, social media, et cetera, they spend a lot of money on psychologists who are trying to figure out how to hijack your brain. The reason why Facebook and Instagram, there's no customer support number for me to call up when I've got a question, because I'm not the customer. I'm the product.
We are the product. That's exactly.
They're selling our attention. And so when it comes to work, we need to be getting into the zone, deep work, flow, be creative, be strategic. And if we're thinking about grabbing that phone every time it buzzes, and the research is clear, we grab our phones, we answer a text, we look at a text in less time than we answer an actual phone call. So it's worse than getting a phone call. And then the switching cost, once we're interrupted, the data's all over. But whether it's 1 minute or 15 minutes or longer, why have that breakup as you're trying to get something done, or to build a relationship that you should be totally present and mindful for? What you said is so important. It's not even on your desk, because there was that crazy research where even if the phone is turned over, but on your desk and not buzzing, you perform cognitively worse because you're kind of like monitoring it. Like, I'm not going to grab that phone. I'm not going to grab that phone. Don't think of the elephant. And you're thinking about it. So they say, get it off the desk, in your drawer, out of the way.
And here's the thing, even if you say, well, I'm not as bad about that as some people. And that may be true. If it's impacting your productivity and your attention at all, just move it. Don't argue with the data or the research and say, well, I'm better than the average. I mean, the research is always about an average.
Right.
You may be better than the average. So what? It's still distracting you. Move it. Turn it off, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, if it were only a phone, see, we're older, right? We still call them phones. Most people just call them their mobile devices. They don't even call it a phone anymore because they don't even use the phone, but that's a whole.
It's like a camera. It's basically become the camera that's always with us, that if you were to ever do a weird thing, like make a phone call, oh yeah, you could do that with it too.
Exactly. Exactly. So, you have another area, and I hate to do this. I'm talking about all the things that I agree with the most, although I love the book, and we are talking with Kevin Kruse. If you just joined us for some reason or weren't paying attention because you were doing something else with that phone that is also what you're listening on.
Right.
So that's the downside of us telling them to put their phone down. We want them to listen to both of our podcasts. But we're talking to Kevin Kruse. We're talking about his new book, Great Leaders Have No Rules. And one of the things you talk about is less to-do list, more calendar. In the book, you call it crowd your calendar. Let's talk about that. And again, you mentioned that you come from you've spent a lot of time thinking about and writing about productivity. Yeah. And so there are a lot of productivity components of this book. That is not the whole book by any means. Right. But I want to talk about that one because, again, I think that people aren't thinking about this in ways that they could be more successful with. So let's talk about why you think we ought to crowd our calendars.
Yeah. So again, traditional wisdom, again, coming from a good place is like anybody who's read Getting Things Done or stuff like that, time management courses. It's like, okay, your calendar is for scheduled items, phone calls, meetings, appointments. And then your to-do list, your task list is where you write down all the stuff you got to do. And, every night we're supposed to prioritize A, B, C, A1, A2, A3, and all that. That's old school. Now that'll work up to a point. First of all, as a tool for getting things done, our brains will work up to 7-ish items, 5 to 7 items. Then we start to forget. So then from 7 to 12, that to-do list idea, write it down, put it in your pocket. You probably can get those done. But we're in a new day and age, and most of us, so certainly the high achievers, you got more than 12 things on your to-do list. And the research shows that 40% of what we put on our to-do list is never done at all. Because it's on the list, but we go to the thing that's easy or urgent or is a better form of procrastination than something else. The other thing is there's something called the Zeigarnik Effect, where if we know we have to do something, but we don't have a plan for it, it's, unconscious. It's what causes insomnia. It's like all of a sudden it's time, we're exhausted all day. When we can sleep, we can't sleep because we're thinking about all the stuff we got to do still. So when I interviewed the highly successful people, first of all, and the leaders, whether they're CEOs, Coach John Wooden from basketball, whoever it was, they are obsessed with time because whether they're getting ready for the next season, the next game, the next quarterly report, whatever it is, that clock is ticking. And they know that their competition or the other team, whatever it is, has the same number of minutes, right? So they're hyper aware of maximizing minutes. And the calendar increases the likelihood that you're going to get it actually done. If you pause, what day, what time, what duration will I do this thing? You're more likely to get it done because you've already picked your time slot to do it. You sleep well at night. The Zeigarnik Effect goes away. And then you're making sure, because there's only 1,440 minutes in the day, you're allocating it's almost like putting dollars down on your spots. You're allocating your minutes to what is most important. And so in a real practical way, this isn't theoretical, so I've got direct reports now because I value the leadership side. I got to get business results, but I also need to get people results. And because I believe in employee engagement, I do one-on-one meetings every Monday. So on my calendar, it's not like, oh yeah, I got to meet with Kevin. We haven't done one.
They're all on the calendar.
They're already there for now to infinity, right? And so the monthly team meetings, the quarterly strategic meetings, the annual meetings, every 6 months I do a career path meeting. They're already pre-scheduled from now until infinity. They're just blocked so I don't accidentally book stuff on top of them. Now, if I got $1 million opportunity with a client, will I ask Kevin to move the date from Monday to Wednesday? Sure. But in general, now you've allocated minutes to investing in your team members, to coaching them, building that relationship, et cetera.
Yeah, having that, and the other thing that does, so first of all, it helps us be more productive for sure. But by locking that into the calendar, we're setting an intention with that team member, and they're going to see our commitment to them differently. They're going to see the value that we place in them differently, and they're going to hold us to that expectation. It's one thing to say, hey, we're going to meet once a week. Another thing to say, put it on the calendar. And I would say that I have some just exactly like you, and I have others with folks where I say, we're going to meet every 2 weeks. And because of the vagaries of our calendars, our strategy is at the end of every meeting, we set the next meeting. Same point, right. Exactly the same point. It's just a matter of how you get there based on the nature of your work. and 100 other things. But using your calendar to manage your work as opposed to using your calendar to see when you have a meeting
Exactly
is a very
right.
different strategy, and I think a very effective strategy.
Cool.
So I want to sort of talk about one more chapter that is quite different than those we've talked about so far. You use a 4-letter word that I've written about a lot as a leader that freaks a lot of people. There's a technical term that freaks a lot of people out. That how can you put leadership and love in the same sentence? You actually title the chapter "Lead with Love," and so. And I'm completely in agreement with how you come about it. Love has lots of different connotations, lots of different meanings. And in a world of Me Too, you're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about here?
Right.
But talk about what you mean when you say that, so we can clarify for people and they don't immediately, hit delete to this podcast.
Yeah. And this was a journey for me, Kevin, because first of all, I was raised in a pretty kind of stern, quiet household. It wasn't like there was a lot of verbal or any kind of expressions of love going on. And I'm an introvert. And the way I was taught for kind of old school management is like, Kevin, don't get too close to your people, because God forbid you got to lay them off or something, or you got to give them some tough feedback. You don't want to have your personal relationship get in the way. You don't want your feelings to get in the way. And that was this old idea of like us versus them, and we're the standoffish boss and all the rest. I say lead with love. And you're right, in this whole Me Too thing, we always got to be careful. We're not talking about any inappropriate love that's going to get you in trouble with HR. It's at a higher level. And what, when I use that term love, it's about love for fellow, humankind. It's the love. The Greeks had this word, I don't know how to say it, agape love, which is like this through line through all the major religions. Love thy neighbor like you love thyself. It's this broader love for humanity and society. But to make it really practical, what helped me is I'm sure others have said it, but I'm not a big sports guy, but like the basketball coach John Wooden, so it was college. So every year he would get new players, and at his very first meeting, he would tell them, you know what? I'm not going to like you all the same, but I will love you all the same. And it's getting, you don't even have to like someone at all. You could kind of hate someone and get on your nerves. You don't want to have a beer with them or talk to them or socialize, but you can still love them as a person. And for me, like, I can get into that place of loving all my team members the same by saying, okay, look, even if this person is doing something that is, I think, wrong or doesn't, I start to say, there, but for the grace of God go I. I mean, like, I don't know what just happened in their world today, or what they're dealing with at home, or who their parents were, how they were raised for 35 years. If I had every moment of their life and been born to their parents with their DNA and gotten up to this moment, I would be doing what they're doing, right? And so I'm not the same person I was when I was 30. People change, people grow. And so my role as the leader is to love everybody the same. And look, I'm still going to give you tough feedback, but it's going to come from a place of caring. I'm trying to make you better. I'm trying to help your career. I'm trying to show you something you might not know, and giving it from a place of love as opposed to a place of punishment or hate or negativity. People pick up on that, and it really, I think, can transform relationships.
I don't think there's any question about it. And by the way, for all of you who are wondering why I like this book, I like this book for lots of reasons, but the fact that he mentions John Wooden, a fellow Purdue graduate,
there you go,
adds to the value. And you do quote Coach Wooden,
quite a bit,
2 or 3 times in the book. So we have a section of the show, Kevin, that you don't know about, but others who watch or listen know, that we call it the fast break. Speaking of basketball,
right, there you go.
Call this the fast break. And what I've got for you, the fast break portion of the show is brought to you by The Remarkable Way, one of our leadership development products. You can learn more, get on the list for the next time we announce more information by going to remarkablepodcast.com/way. Now, the fast break, Kevin, is 3. I have 3 words for you. I'm going to give you the word, and then you can tell me whatever you want to say, whatever your thoughts are, short or long, about that idea. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Looking without a net, so to speak. The first one is transparency.
Love it. It's all about transparency, vulnerability, and authenticity. It is a key to earning trust.
Now, see, I usually give my guests one of them that I know is a softball because that's kind of in the book. The other two, a little less so. Here we go. Next one is, well, they're maybe in there, but not quite as obvious. The next one is accountability.
Okay, so accountability is something I didn't truly value early on. Now, I think I've always been like, I hold myself accountable, but I was weak at holding other people accountable. Why? Because I had a fatal flaw. I had a need to be liked. Now, we all want to be liked. Like, you know, hey, yeah, everybody wants to be liked. But if you have a need to be liked, that's going to slow you down from holding people accountable. You'll make excuses for them or believe their excuses. You'll stop giving them feedback. And it also slows down decision-making. So for me, accountability triggers like, wow, I was really bad at holding people accountable. And accountability, like nobody wants to work in a company or a team where there is no accountability. Well, why should I work so hard then? He's just going to skate yet again, right? So it's critical. And for a lot of leaders who don't hold people accountable, I think it's because they want to be the friend, the nice boss, the popular boss. And you got to get over that. People don't need another friend. They need a leader who's going to make them better.
And the third word is attitude.
Attitude. What comes to mind, not a lot, but I'm a big believer in having an attitude of gratitude. And I only own 2 pieces of artwork, and one of them literally says attitude of gratitude. And I start my morning thinking of 3 unique things that I'm grateful for, because I think that's like my highest value. I set my attitude through gratitude, and it carries me from there.
All right. So awesome. See, you passed the fast break with flying colors, Kevin.
I am sweating though. I was nervous. Like, oh, what's coming next?
Nothing like putting you on edge just a little. So before we're done, a couple things that I'd like to ask all of my guests. I mean, I like you on the LEADx podcast, leadership podcast. There's, we've both had, and we've had a lot of the same guests. You and I talked about this before we started. When you have the chance to talk with high achievers, there are a couple things I always ask them. And so I always have been asking on the podcast. And one of those is, so what is something that you do, Kevin, for fun?
Because I started up this newest company, now we just started our 3rd year. I've got less, I'm choosing to have less fun, free time than I did before. I mean, I'm back to working some pretty crazy hours. Having said that, a guilty pleasure that a lot of people don't know about me is like, I love the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm a basketball fan, and it's a fun time to be a basketball fan in Philadelphia. And so whether it's watching a game on TV or, maybe 2-3 times a year, taking my son and actually going to the event, like that is a lot of fun for me.
So speaking of Philadelphia and basketball, a couple of years ago, I was in Houston and watched Villanova in a very exciting national championship game.
Yeah. That Villanova was fun. That was a good year. That was a
pretty darned exciting Final Four. Anyway, so the other question I like to ask people, and for those of you who are watching or listening, it's the only question I tell people ahead of time. And that question is, so what are you reading now, Kevin, or what's something you've read recently that people might be interested in knowing about?
Yeah, well, so I'm gonna. I don't take a lot of vacation. I just came back from a short vacation, and so I read a couple of like a Jack Reacher, novel kind of thing, sort of just popcorn, of the mind. And I read a very interesting book about health by purposely creating rules, which, given that I'm the no rules guy, I thought was interesting. But the one I'll specifically share is. Gallup has a new book coming out, I think in May. So depending on when this airs, the book is called It's the Manager. And it's Gallup research is very clear that, 70% of the variance in how we feel about work, employee engagement, goes back to who the manager is, right?
Those of you who are here, it's about you. Look in the mirror.
That's exactly right. And it's, the people are always wondering, how come employee engagement isn't getting fixed more? Why is it still so low? Because the classic thing is either one, the company and the CEOs, they just don't care, or they care and they'll drop those annual surveys. They get the results back and the results stay at the top. And the vice president of HR and the CEO, everyone's like, we're low on communication. Let's have the CEO send out more emails. You know, they
Let's
think
do a
they know.
video conference.
Yeah, let's do a video conference. They think they know the answers. And it's not that the top shouldn't care, but whatever your mission, vision, values are, look in a large company and you're going to have highly engaged teams and low engaged teams. Same CEO, same mission, vision, values, everything else. What's the difference? The manager. And so Gallup's finally written a book about this, about the specific competencies, traits. Of course, they're into strengths, et cetera, et cetera. So they lay it all out. But I think this is going to be a groundbreaking book. It's a thick book, so a lot of people aren't going to want to read it. But like just that title is going to focus for what we do. Like, hey, everybody, it's about the manager. So invest in your frontline managers. Be careful who you promote into management. Train the heck out of your managers and let them know the buck stops with them.
So, you know, that's exactly right. The number one reason people leave a job is they fire their boss, right? I mean, we could go on and on. And so I'm looking, I knew this book was coming. I mean, as you and I are talking now, long before this is going to come out into the world, I knew this book was coming, but I hadn't had a chance to read it yet. So I'm looking forward to that as well. It's The Manager. And we've been talking, everybody, with Kevin Kruse, the author of, among other things, Great Leaders Have No Rules. Kevin, how can people learn more about you and the LEADx work and the book, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, the book's available in bookstores everywhere and, of course, Amazon.com. And if you want to get the book from somewhere and then just send in the receipt, go to norulesleadership.com because we've got like hundreds of dollars of bonus offers for your listeners. Everything from you get audible and audio and ebook copies of my other books. You get 3 months free tuition into that LEADx Academy. You get webinars, like all this other stuff for the price of one book, all related to being more productive and being a better leader.
All right, awesome. So I now have one question for all of you who have been with us during this time. It's the same question I ask you every week. Now what? What are you going to do with this? Now, I can't think of any recent podcast that's been any more practical than this. So did you get ideas that help you think about what you ought to do with your phone or what you ought to do with your calendar, what you ought to do with some rules that might be floating around your office? But seriously, our goal is to help you think about how you can be a more effective leader. And that doesn't just come from you listening or watching. That comes from you taking action. So I lovingly leave you with that question. Now what? What are you going to do with what Kevin and I have shared with you? So Kevin, thanks so much for being here.
It was a great conversation, Kevin. Same first name, same mindset on leadership and love. I love it.
There you go. And so everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you'll decide to come back and join us, and you can join our ongoing conversation, get updates on what we're doing, and have a hand in how this podcast evolves by joining our Facebook group. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook to do that. And we're here every week. So come back and join us again, will you? Right here on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.